welcome back to Ron Hasn't Seen. I'm Ron, and on this channel, I go back and watch movies I should have watched a long time ago for one reason or another, but I've overlooked them, and this is kind of my way of keeping myself on track to watch one of these movies per week. So, right now, I'm finishing up a run of 1970s movies with 1973's Serpico. It's a police drama starring Al Pacino as a titular Frank Serpico. It was directed by Sidney Lumet and was written by Waldo Salt and Norman Rexler based on Peter Maas's book, which was completed with input from the real Frank Serpico, so it was obviously based on real events. The movie is told mostly in flashbacks, opening with Serpico being rushed to the hospital after being shot. We then jump back to Serpico starting his career with the police department, and we see him kind of breaking some protocols, wearing like regular street clothes instead of like what the uniform is. But it ends up getting him shot at by other cops when he's chasing a burglar. So later on, he's shown about finding out payoffs and cops kind of helping with some number running and things like that. And he refuses his shares of the money, and this makes the other cops a little nervous that he's going to rat them out, and he kind of does. He just keeps going to his higher-ups, starts with the captain, who just kind of tells him to keep the money, and they turn a blind eye. He goes up, to the mayor, to the DA, and all of them kind of minimize this kind of corruption we see in the police department. So eventually he's forced to go to the press because no one's really taking this seriously. So once that article's published, some other cops kind of set him up on a raid where he's going to get shot and they're not backing him up. And that's where we find him at the beginning of the movie. We cut back to the present where he's in the hospital, and then we see him testifying before the Public Nap Commission, which is a real thing. He receives a medal and retires from the police force, and that's the end of the movie. It was a film with a very quick production timeline. The book came out in 1973. One of the other cops from the Nap Commission was trying to sell his story to the movies too, but De Laurentiis, the producer, had worked with Maas on a previous film, so they kind of put this into production, and the script went through with Salt doing the first draft. Everybody thought it was a bit too political. Pacino wouldn't attach himself to it. It was touched up to get what we got. Then the filming timeline was constricted by Pacino filming Godfather 2 and his involvement there. Pacino did meet with Serpico to kind of get a feel for the actual person, to how he's going to portray him. But yeah, it was only filmed over like less than 2 full months, featuring over 100 locations and 100 different speaking parts. So it was a massive film, even though it's not really that long, to be done really quickly. And they also had to shoot it backwards because Serpico has a heavier beard at the end, and they would just kind of shave it down because there was no time to grow that beard over the course of the shooting time. Final budget came in at about $3.3 million and grossed over $23 million. There's a little discrepancy. Could be as high as 29. Seems a little weird that they didn't lock that down, but this is early 70s, so it's not news how much a movie makes like it is today. I think that's a little weird that a lot of major press focuses on box office returns when I think even like 20 years ago you knew what was number one at the box office, but you really weren't paying attention to breaking records and stuff like that. I think maybe after Titanic and Avatar that kind of became a common thing, but I don't think the average Joe seemed to get as much of that as they do now. It came out to some pretty good critical praise, and some police were protesting it. So were a lot of the other people involved in the real story. They were criticizing it, kind of martyring Serpico above all. There were a few other cops and people who were involved in exposing this corruption, but it made Serpico look like the one person doing it. And Frank Serpico was actually barred from the set, apparently, for complaining about the artistic licenses being taken with the film. Other people said they just didn't want him kind of giving input on like Pacino's performance, but those are, either way, he wasn't allowed on the set anymore. So I thought it was a good movie. I don't think it was a great movie. I think the performance was great, but something about it didn't grab me. In the series of 70s movies, I don't think it lives up to the classic level of Chinatown, Deer Hunter, or French Connection. Like, there's not. I don't. Maybe I thought this was more of a classic than it was. It was a very good movie. Won some, I think, a Golden Globe and some other awards. Um, but I think being such a true story with direct input from the subject of it, it was not going to be a big action thriller of a cop movie. And it felt a little more like, yeah, it felt like a biofilm. And it was a character piece. And I just wasn't expecting that. I was expecting the cop drama with some action. But there's nothing about the movie that's not done well. It's just, I don't think it grabbed me. And, the film, really the emotion you see with Serpico is not fear or anger. I think it's frustration with the system. And I think that kind of bleeds when your character is portrayed so well and is focusing on one emotion that bleeds. The audience is supposed to feel that frustration with the system, but feeling frustration while watching a movie kind of turns your emotions toward that movie. And I kind of felt it was dragging, even though I really, looking back, I don't think it was. But during the movie, I was like, where is this going? Let's go forward. And so, yeah, it felt slow to me. It was good at the end, but I don't think I'm going to watch this again. I don't think this has to be on a must-watch list, but I think it's something, if you're a fan of Pacino, you're a fan of crime dramas, it's something you could see, but I don't think you have to go out of your way to see this one. Yeah, I'm gonna rank, I guess, of the 70s movies in the series. I'm putting Chinatown first, followed by The French Connection, then Deer Hunter, then Mean Streets, then a kind of a gap than this. I think all four of those were good movies. I think Mean Streets showed more potential than it did what it actually contained. I think Deer Hunter was a little too heavy to be at the top of my list. So, yeah, that's it for the 70s run. I'm going to be going into some 80s movies. Next week's going to be Roadhouse. One I really can't believe I haven't seen, growing up. I feel like this would have been like something on cable all the time. But thank you guys for watching this episode of Ron Hasn't Seen, and we'll see you next week.